A French government ministry evacuated when a handful of Yellow Vest protesters tried to storm the building. It marks the 8th straight Saturday of demonstrations against President Macron's policies. President Trump, meanwhile, says little headway is made during talks to end the US government shutdown and warns it could last for years if Democrats refuse funding for his border wall. And flights and ferries resumed service in southern Thailand after Tropical Storm Pabuk barreled across the land. France 24's team on the ground meets those who are now picking up the pieces. Welcome to the France 24 newsroom in Paris. I'm Alexander Orcott. Well, we begin here in Paris, where some 4,000 people have taken part in an 8th straight week of Yellow Vest protests. There were minor scuffles and the police fired tear gas near the Champs-Élysées after the protesters threw projectiles at them as well as nearby journalists. Government spokesman, who had to evacuate his ministry when protesters tried to force their way in, denounced those still demonstrating as hardliners who only want to bring down the government. Erin Okinkie has more.
It's the first time a government minister has been forced to evacuate a building because of Yellow Vest demonstrations. On Saturday, protesters seized an abandoned forklift at a nearby bank and used it to barge through the doors of government spokesperson Benjamin Griveau's offices. Armed with iron rods, more than a dozen individuals, including Yellow Vest protesters, forcefully stormed into the building's courtyard, forcing the minister and his team to evacuate the premises.
It's never pleasant to see people barge into your workplace, but it's not me who was attacked. It's the Republic, its institutions, it's our government's democracy that was attacked.
As the spokesperson and his team were being evacuated, the rioters fled the scene, escaping before the arrival of the police. At least 50,000 protesters came out across France for the 8th straight week of demonstrations. Though the protests remained largely peaceful in the morning, clashes with authorities broke out in multiple cities early on into the evening. In central Paris, rioters torched cars and set barricades on fire. Elsewhere in the capital, protesters launched projectiles at police officers, who responded with tear gas. French President Emmanuel Macron called for calm via his Twitter account late Saturday.
Once again, extreme violence has hit the Republic, its guardians, its representatives, and its symbols. Those who commit these violent acts forget the hearts of our social contract. Justice will be done. People must compose themselves and allow for debate and dialogue.
In reaction to Saturday's demonstrations, Interior Minister Christophe Castaner held an emergency crisis response meeting in the capital and urged protesters to respect the rule of law.
Protests also continue in Hungary, where around 6,000 people marched against the nationalist Prime Minister Viktor Orban. They're demonstrating against a so-called slave law adopted by Parliament last month. It increases the amount of overtime employers can demand from their workers and allows payment to be delayed by up to 3 years. The government argues, however, that the law is needed to tackle Hungary's labour shortage. And to Serbia, where tens of thousands of people have marched through Belgrade's frozen streets to demand freedoms for the opposition as well as for the media. The demonstrations have been held every week since the end of November, when the opposition politician Borko Stefanovic was beaten by unknown assailants. Well, President Alexander Vučić says he'll never bow to the protesters' demands, but said he could call snap elections. An Egyptian police officer has been killed in eastern Cairo as he tried to defuse a bomb found near a church. It was discovered on Saturday, just 2 days before Coptic Christmas is celebrated. With further details, Welia spoke to our correspondent in the Egyptian capital, Alexandra Chianti.
According to the latest information, in fact, the police have spotted an object that looked suspect, and the police tried to defuse the bomb, but first of all took the bomb away from the church, and thus we didn't have an enormous death toll. On the other hand, it's clear that the bomb is targeting Coptic churches. There is a huge police mobilization in Egypt for this feast of the 7th of January, Christmas, Coptic Christmas, and especially that this year that we will have the inauguration of the biggest cathedral in Egypt, but also in the Middle East and Africa, by the Pope, Coptic Orthodox Pope Tawadros II, and the Egyptian President Al-Sisi in the new capital. So for the Islamist group linked in a way or another to Daesh or the Islamic State, it's the perfect opportunity to strike, especially that it's difficult to have security all over Egypt, since there are more than 3,000 churches in Egypt.
Now, a few moments of harmless fun have turned to tragedy in Poland after 5 teenage girls were killed by a fire during an escape room game. The events involve locking people inside rooms where they must solve puzzles to get out, but a faulty heating system in an adjacent room caused the blaze that filled their room with smoke. A 26-year-old man working there has also been hospitalized with burns. And Barnell has the latest.
In Koszalin in northern Poland, shock and grief. Many still can't believe it. 5 young girls killed in an escape room game gone wrong. A game where participants have to solve a series of puzzles to leave a locked room.
I have a daughter of that age. I cannot imagine. This is a tragedy which I cannot comprehend.
These are people, neighbors from Koszalin. It's a terrible tragedy.
The fire broke out in a space just like this one. Investigators in Poland blame leaking gas cylinders in the heating system for the fire. Firefighters also pin the tragedy on lax safety procedures and a lack of proper evacuation routes. In response, Poland's Interior Minister has ordered fire safety inspections at nearly 1,000 escape room locations.
All such buildings, clubs, rooms will be controlled by fire experts. We'll also check if there are emergency exits allowing people to leave those types of rooms immediately. It's worth noting that in such escape rooms there should be a moderator, a person who can let out those locked inside immediately in case of danger. This will also be a subject of our control procedures.
Escape rooms are growing increasingly popular across the world. There are at least 1,300 in France and 1,000 in the UK.
Well, we now go to the United States, where President Trump has said not much headway has been made to end a government shutdown that he's threatened to keep going for years. The White House is refusing to budge on his key demand of $5.6 billion of funding for a wall along the US-Mexico border. Our White House correspondent Philip Crowther has been following those events closely for us, and he sent this update.
As the partial government shutdown enters its 3rd week here in the United States, it's becoming clearer and clearer that the president sees this as his unique opportunity to get that financing for one of his campaign promises, building that wall between the United States and Mexico. The president is adamant that he will get that wall built despite a lack of optimism coming out of Saturday's meeting at the White House. He says very little headway was made in a meeting that was led from the White House side by Vice President Mike Pence, but that didn't include on the Democratic or Republican side any members of Congress. So no real solutions were discussed. This is a government shutdown that could last a very long time. In the words of the US president, it could last months or even years. That has never been the case with a government shutdown in the past. The differences are very clear between Democrats and Republicans, and they haven't shifted since the very first day of this partial government shutdown that has led to hundreds of thousands of federal employees being told not to go to work and who are not being paid right now. Those positions on the Democratic side and on the Republican side are these. Republicans are saying that they want this wall to be built, and the president wants over $5 billion of financing in any kind of a temporary budget that might be voted by Congress. Democrats, and with the new House Speaker Nancy Pelosi at its head, are saying that there will be absolutely no money for a border wall.
The newly elected chief of Venezuela's opposition-run Congress has vowed to confront President Nicolas Maduro and seek fair elections a few days before Maduro is sworn in for a second term. The Congress has few concrete means of easing Maduro's grip on power, however, as the president has created an all-powerful constituent assembly that replaces its day-to-day functions. Nonetheless, the new leader, Juan Guaido, has said he won't give up.
We propose to reaffirm the illegitimacy of Nicolas Maduro Moros for not having been elected on May 20th. That from January 10th he will be usurping the presidency of the Republic, that consequently this National Assembly, as the sole legitimate power elected by the Venezuelan people, assumes the representation of the people.
Now to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where long-awaited election results have been postponed by a week until next Sunday. The head of the Electoral Commission says this is due to a delay in ballot arrivals, although the highly influential Catholic Church, which placed observers nationwide, said as early as Thursday that there is a clear winner and urged the government to announce the result to prevent unrest. Our correspondent Thomas Nicolon is in Kinshasa.
Patience is required in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Electoral Commission was due to announce the provisional results of the presidential election on Sunday, but it is unable to, partly because compiling the results from all around the country is taking longer than expected. This country is as big as Western Europe. The Electoral Commission says it will announce the provisional results from last Sunday's election next week, but it seems unable to set a date yet. Earlier this week, the Catholic Church announced that it already knew the winner of the presidential election and expected the Electoral Commission's results to reflect the people's choice, to which the Electoral Commission replied by accusing the Church of brainwashing the people and preparing for an insurrection in DR Congo. If violence is avoided in this country, it might be the first ever peaceful and democratic transition of power.
Airport and ferry services have now resumed in southern Thailand after one of the worst storms to hit the region in decades. Tropical storm Pabuk barreled across the Gulf on Friday, triggering flash floods, knocking out power lines and destroying homes. Although world-famous beach resorts were largely spared major damage. France 24 has been meeting some of those who are now picking up the pieces.
For 3 days, Madame Jarida has not stopped running. Tropical storm Pabuk ravaged her home. Now the grandmother, the wife of a fisherman, is without a roof to shelter them from the rain.
The ceiling is destroyed. Everything is damaged. Look here and here. There also.
In Nakansi Tamarat, Jarida is far from an isolated case. This fishing town has been the most exposed to the passage of the storm. Jarida's neighbors were also flooded.
Everything is destroyed. Everything is gone. My house is devastated. It's underwater.
But in southern Thailand, in the face of the disaster, families are getting organized. Nam, Jarida's husband, has already collected the nails and tiles from the local government to repair his home, and the whole family is helping out.
Well, if I don't do it now, where are we going to sleep tonight? It's been raining heavily, and it will start again soon. We're drenched.
At 63, Jom has spent 50 years at sea and has seen everything. Storms, a tsunami. But now the weather in January, which is summer in this part of the world, is so bad he cannot get his boat out to sea to make a living.
I can't go out on the sea in this kind of weather. The waves are too big. But I really need to fish.
Storm Pabuk spared the tourist islands of Koh Phangan and Koh Samui, but further down the coast the storm killed 2 people while they were driving. The fishermen have avoided the worst, but they will have to rebuild their houses in the rain, and it will be many days before they can get back to sea.
Those are all our top stories this hour, and I'm going to leave you out in the cold with some stunning images from Harbin Ice Festival. For a few weeks each year, huge buildings and ice sculptures illuminated by lights are created in one of China's northernmost cities. I'll leave you with those. Stay tuned to France 24. I'll be back with more news updates in 15 minutes.